Now, there have been 50 suits approximately under the investor-state provisions so far. I say approximately because some of them are still secret. We don't know. There have been 19 against Canada, 17 against Mexico, and 14 against the United States. And of these, Canada has settled out of court or lost 4 cases, Mexico has lost 3 cases, and the United States has not lost any, because adjudicators are very reluctant to use this against the U.S.
When Bryan Mulrooney proposed the free trade agreement, it was a Canadian initiative. It wasn't that popular with public opinion, but it was a major initiative which we initiated, which the U.S. President Ronald Reagan got fully behind. The free trade agreement was, perhaps one of the most dramatic of any period in our history. But there, the public attitudes changed. The public went from negative to positive, and even to this day, I mean, depends the questions you ask, but on the whole, attitudes are fairly positive towards free trade.
Free trade is not good for any nation that's involved in free trade. No nation benefits from free trade.
How would you feel about a North American Union, kind of like a European Union between Canada, the U.S., and Mexico?
I think that would
probably not work.
That would not work.
Nah, man. Nah, man.
That wouldn't be a good idea.
I think maybe Canada and the U.S. would be okay together. I don't think Mexico.
They shouldn't do that. Because at that point, Canada is no longer going to be Canada.
Canada has a hard enough time keeping its identity.
I'm a Canadian, so I want to stick with my country.
I just can't see that being favorable for Canadians in any way, shape, or form.
We're still under British control partially,
so we can't really.
So that wouldn't happen. Like, I
wouldn't like it anyways.
I thought they've been trying to do that for years.
Okay, you think it's a good idea? Go ahead.
Absolutely.
The World Trade Organization is the only international organization dealing with the global rules of trade between nations. Its main function is to ensure that trade flows as smoothly, predictably, and freely as possible. The result is a more prosperous, peaceful, and accountable economic world.
What's the WTO all about?
It's all about greed. It's all about, look at these kids up here. They got a sign up that says, don't trade our future. For these young kids in the street today, it's about their future being traded off by corporations who frankly don't give a shit what happens to them. That's what it's about. That's what people are fed up with it. They understand it.
Direct action brought these people together. Many of them on the street I've talked to have never been in a direct action before. They feel very empowered. They're starting to understand that people can be empowered and take charge of things themselves, and direct action is perfect for getting people in that role to take charge over their own lives.
We'll never be divided. Together, united, we'll never be divided.
I go back to the 1988 election, which was fought on the issue of free trade. And the opponents of free trade actually won the majority of the vote. The Mulroney government was elected with a minority of votes. At that time, we had a high level of participation from all sectors of society. Now, it's true that since then the issue has faded from consciousness, but I think there are moments when symbolic issues, for example, Canadian water and sovereignty over our fresh water, there still are elements that would like to get a hold of that and would like to use some of the possible leverage through NAFTA, including the proportional sharing clause, to open up the floodgates. So I think there will be moments when symbolic issues like water will come to the fore, and we will have a resurgence of interest in these issues.
From the U.S. perspective, the largest source of energy imports by far is from Canada and Mexico. Roughly 1/3 of our total energy imports come from our two neighbors.
Proportional sharing clause is very important because it's unique to all international trade agreements that I have ever studied. It effectively makes Canada an energy colony. What the clause says is if Canada were to take measures to conserve some of our non-renewable hydrocarbons, natural gas and petroleum, If we take those measures, we still have to export to the United States the same proportion of our oil or gas exports that were sold over the previous 3 years. What if Canada wanted to preserve 10% of our petroleum production for future generations and for conservation purposes? Well, when you work through the numbers and you find that we're obliged to sell the U.S. 2/3 of the petroleum we produce, the effect of applying the proportional sharing clause could actually mean there would be shortages to meet the needs of Canada.
Canada is a great multicultural, multilateral country. We need Canada's leadership and ingenuity to develop new commissions or organizations whose purpose is to graft a North American vision onto the landscape and push forward for North American policies and institutions as well. So I hope that Canada sees within itself the capacity to have a big effect and to take the lead. And if it took the lead and worked closely with Mexico, my guess is the United States would be very agreeable to that.
They don't really need the money. As you can see, housing is natural materials. The fruits, all of this they have farming, they have hunting, they have everything they need to live and more. But then they get the progress arriving to these towns, power lines, running water, and these are services that you need to pay for. You cannot pay with a bag of corn, you need to pay with cash. So they start needing the money, getting in the capitalism system, and that's when poverty arrives to these towns. You know, they need the money. Okay, I have some money, I buy a radio and a TV, I see what's on TV, it's pure marketing. Things that they didn't need for over 2,000 years, in a decade they start needing.
Pues bueno, el Tratado de Libre Comercio, como tú sabes, no todos estamos realmente informados como se debe. O sea, en lo único que nos afecta es en la desinformación. ¿Me explico? No todos tenemos también la capacidad de admitir el libre comercio.
Y nada nos ha beneficiado el libre comercio. De verdad, estamos igual o peor ahorita con esta crisis que tenemos. Realmente es difícil la situación.
Creo que siento que el producto mexicano va y con un precio bajo y regresa con un precio más caro y se afecta porque pues lo que puede ser México consumir y nosotros consumir nuestro producto tenemos que mandarlo para allá.
Nunca hemos visto nada que nos ayude, que nos apoye, nada. Es nada más para los que tienen dinero, el pobre nunca.
How has the experience in Mexico been in terms of NAFTA since it started 15 years ago?
Ha sido una situación positiva, ha mejorado realmente el comercio entre los tres países. Sin embargo, lo que sí te puedo decir que hubo ciertos acuerdos dentro del mismo, nosotros le llamamos TLC o Telecam, que no se cumplieron como es la situación del transporte, que es por eso que ahorita volvieron a gravar, o sea, hay que pagar impuestos por algunos productos norteamericanos.
No estamos informados al 100% de qué se trata el libre comercio. O sea, si a nosotros nos informaran como comerciantes qué vínculo nosotros tendríamos con el Tratado de Libre Comercio, sabríamos realmente de qué se trata o qué lo compone al 100%. Pero como no tenemos ese tipo de información, es muy difícil que todo, en concreto, expresemos en qué nos beneficia y en qué no.
Given the similarities of our two economies, of our two cultures and our countries, it seemed to me doable to pursue what I've always referred to as a kind of common economic space, a single economic space, where the border becomes irrelevant. I think Mexico could become part of it, as indeed NAFTA was modeled after the Canada-US agreement. And as the Europeans, as you will know from the whole history of the European community, remarkable achievements they've had, it's all been incremental over the years at different speeds.
They've been doing it incrementally for years. The European Union was initially started with an agreement in the 1950s to regulate the production of steel among all the European countries. And the argument then was that you would hate to have a country like Germany corner the market on steel and develop an empire that would attack the rest of Europe again. So they had a reason based on recent history at the time, which said we need to have an agreement that regulates production of steel across Europe, and from there they built on it with subsequent agreements.